If you miss a monthly repayment, will it really damage your credit score? And should you ever trust the sites that promise to give you a free credit rating?
Well, Martin Lewis is here to answer that and tell you how to make yourself more attractive to lenders. So, first of all, what is it?
OK. The first thing to understand is your credit history doesn't just affect mortgages, loans, credit cards, which you'd assume. It also affects, can you get a monthly direct debit energy bill, your monthly car insurance, a contract mobile phone. And not only does it affect acceptance, but on credit products, also what rate are you going to get is dictated by your credit worthiness. Now, I'm being very careful in my terms, credit worthiness, because people get credit scoring, credit rating, credit file, they get them all confused. What actually happens is when you apply to a lender for a new product that has an element of credit in it, as a mobile phone contract does, it's going to try and predict your future behaviour based on your past behaviour. And to do that, it uses three pieces of information. The information that's held on you at the credit reference agency is your credit file. Information you put on your application form, which people often forget and is probably the most important because it includes the crucial thing, your income, and any past dealings that lender has had with you. So going with your own bank, if you've got good history, can help. If you've got a bad history, can hinder. And it then puts them all together. But the important thing to understand, and why I use the analogy, this is a bit like going on the pool, right? Because when you're on the pool, you can make yourself as attractive as possible, and there are things that will make most people fancy you more, but not everyone is ever going to fancy you. And each lender scores you differently based on its own wish list of what is a profitable customer. And what's good for one isn't necessarily good for another, which is why this idea you have a universal credit rating or there's a blacklist isn't true in the UK. It is in the States, and that's why it gets confusing. There is no universal score of you anywhere which is used to decide whether you get credit or not. They all score you differently.
So is it worth getting one of those free credit score things that people offer?
Well, we've seen them being advertised, more and more of them recently, and what those are is that the credit reference agencies or other agencies are putting out credit scores which are a very good indication of your rough credit worthiness based on your credit history. But what people get in touch with me all the time is say, I got a perfect credit score and I've just been rejected. How does this work? Because that's just one element. First of all, every lender scores you differently. So this is a good indication of are you a good or a bad risk. And secondly, it misses out the crucial piece. How much do you earn? Can you afford it? And when you're credit scored, you might have the best credit score in the world, but if you can't afford it, you're going to be rejected. So there's a lot more that goes into it than that. So it's a good thing to look at to give you a rough idea of whether or not you're a good or bad score. But also your income should go into this. And I actually think if you really want to find out how good or bad you are, there's soft search tools on credit cards and other things and eligibility calculators which tell you your odds of acceptance for a product. Now, that's actually what there's no point in having a credit score unless you're going to be accepted for a product. So check one of those out. If you get a lot of high percentages, you're pretty good. If you get a lot of low percentages, you're not so good.
Didn't you once say that if you check your credit rating, then it brings your credit rating down?
No. People say that, and I say that's not true. But you're right. This is what happens. When you apply for your credit rating, it leaves a note on your file. Now, we always talk about notes on your file as a bad thing, but applying to see your credit score actually leaves a note on your file that you can see, but lenders can't. So it doesn't impact what lenders can. But people get very worried about it because they go, well, you told me I shouldn't have these marks on my file, and I've got to mark every time I have a look at my credit file. That particular mark isn't a problem. But checking your file is important. So I'm now talking about your files. Remember I said all the language, because credit rating doesn't exist. You get credit, you have a credit score which is sold to you, which is a loose indication. Each company also credit scores you that different, but you have a credit file. Now, that file is held at one of three places. Experian's the biggest, Equifax next, Core Credit the third. And they hold lots of information about your financial data. And you should be checking those at least once a year and before any big application. And here's the real problem. If there's an error on that file, and it can literally just be an error, and you get rejected, and then you apply again and you still get rejected and you don't bother to check the error, even if you then later fix the error, the fact you've got all these applications on your file, because you made more applications because you kept getting rejected, that'll stop you getting credit in future. So it's a vicious circle.
So if you do spot something on there, how do you change it?
Well, if it's just a clerical error, you can get in touch with them. What's more difficult,
In touch with who?
You get in touch with the credit reference agency itself and say, that isn't true, that didn't happen. And they have systems for doing that. And often you should check all three files. And you can do that, by the way. It's got a statutory right to do it for £2, but there's tricks, and I'll put details of how to do this on the website. You can do it for free, basically, if you if you go and sign up to one of their free trials and make sure you cancel after a month, you can see your credit file for free. That's going to go happen. But then you get in touch with them. If you've got an actual default or a real problem on your file, then you have to negotiate with the company you put it on. If you think it's unfair, you can put a note on your file called a notice of correction and make a formal complaint to the financial ombudsman. But that's if there's something here's a classic example. You ordered a good, you were meant to pay for it, it never arrived. They say it did arrive, they put a mark on your file because you haven't paid for it. You're in dispute with them, there's a mark on your file. You should put a notice of correction saying, I'm not paying them because I've refused to pay them. They didn't deliver the goods. It slows things down but can help you get through.